Hey, what's up, Centerpoint? Thank you so much for joining us on this special online experience. My name is Bryant, lead pastor of Centerpoint. It's my wife, Nicole.
I'm Nicole.
Yep.
I didn't know if you were going to have me introduce myself, but you
No,
keep going.
there you go. So this is a special online experience this weekend because we are having no services. We call it Sabbath Sunday. And it's really an opportunity for us to really remember what this weekend is about, those who've made the ultimate sacrifice. Also give you time with family, and it's a really huge thank you for us to our bridge builders, who are those who volunteer to serve at Centerpoint, and they do it week in, week out, so incredibly faithful. So wherever you're at, on a back porch, by a pool, listening or watching, man, we're so glad. A couple things real quick. Next weekend, we start a brand new series called Love Where You Live. Super excited about this, and we say it all the time, like, the heart of our church is really invested in a bite. Like, the relationships we have around us, taking 30 seconds of courage to invite somebody to come, and every weekend we see and hear about stories of life change. So Love Where You Live starts next week. We'll be back in person. And then last thing is this: if you're brand new with us, we'd love to connect with you. This week we don't have any online hosts, which we normally do on Facebook, YouTube, on the app, wherever else. But here's what you can do: is text Centerpoint to 94,000. We'll send you a link. If you're brand new here, we'd love to send you a gift. If you've got any feedback, or you just need to connect with us in other ways through a prayer request or whatever, just text Centerpoint to 94,000. So with that said,
let's dive in.
We're talking about baby monsters because we're in part 2 of this series called Baby Monsters. And the whole idea of the series is just this, is that the littlest things have the power to kill the biggest dreams.
Yeah.
And that is especially true in relationships.
Yes.
Like, a lot of times it's those little things in relationships that are left unchecked. It's subtle, it's below the surface, it's not that big a deal, nobody's gonna call you on it. And over time though, if you do not destroy and identify those things in their infancy, like, those little monsters grow up and they can sabotage, they can kill your relationship. So today, what we wanna talk about specifically is kind of 4 baby monsters that I think we would entitle kind of 4 lies that we easily believe that can lead us off track.
And I do think, like, specifically in marriages, like, and in any really kind of relationship, it's easy to get into autopilot. It's easy to just coast, to get comfortable. And I think that's when we inadvertently start to believe and buy into these lies. And so I think every once in a while, like, even if you're at a good place in your relationships, still tune in to this, because as we go through these couple of lies, you may start to realize, like, gosh, man, I didn't even realize that I'd been buying into this lie, you know? So
that's
anyways.
such a great point, because that is the point, is even when it's good.
It's a great point, because that is the point.
Yeah, because you can just, like, you get on autopilot and you ignore those little things, and that's how it starts.
Well, and especially during busy seasons, or season with kids, or, you know, seasons with a lot of change or whatever. You know, your relationship kind of just gets into survival mode. And so we really want to just kind of go through these. I think there are 5 lies.
Yeah, I said 4, but there's 5.
Yeah,
I mean, there's probably 100, but we're going to talk about
to help you go from surviving to really thriving in your relationships.
Now, here's the thing. I think it's important.
Yeah.
Like, it's never going to be perfect. Like, sin entered the world, it jacked up everything. And so healthy is not perfect.
Yes.
Like, us driving over here, Nicole was driving because I had to go over some notes for another video shoot, and we were arguing on the way.
Because he was clinging to the, like, arm handle, and I was like, this is a little over dramatic. Like, he was, like, clinging to it and, like, just staring at me. And I was like,
this is a perfect point. It was like we were coming up on cars that were stopped, and we were coming in hot. Like, the car was not stopping. And so somehow I needed to express my terror at the fact that we were about to wreck in some kind of more compassionate way, rather than, I think we're gonna wreck, which is pretty much how I responded. And it was like, boom, boom, in the car. And so, but it's a perfect example. So like, that was us coming like this, here today. So it's not going to be perfect. And so we know some of you are in a place where maybe it's really bad right now. And this may not even be a marriage relationship. It may be a dating relationship.
A parent-child
relationship. A lot
relationship,
of this is going to apply to other relationships. It may be really good. You just talked about that, or you're somewhere in the middle. But hopefully this will help you. So let's dive into it. I'll deal with the first one.
Do the first one,
And the first kind of baby monster that you have to identify, or the first lie, as we're entitling it, is being married or in a relationship is going to make me whole. And this is a really big one. And here's the thing I would say, too, is the church sometimes has this tendency of elevating marriage to the point that it's actually above what Scripture elevates it to. Like, Jesus was single and had a pretty good run.
Yeah.
Like, he did all right. And marriage is incredibly important, but we have to make room for everybody. Like, the Scripture even talks about God's not even going to call everybody to that. So in your singleness, you're not less than whole. Like, God's called you to something. So I think it's really important that we talk about that. But a marriage or relationship is not going to make you whole. There's two kind of myths. I heard somebody talk about this years ago. I think it was Andy Stanley maybe in Love, Sex, Dating, a book that he wrote, or something similar to this. But basically two myths, the compatibility myth and the right person myth. And the compatibility myth is kind of this idea is, I'm looking for somebody who's going to accept me with all of my flaws. Maybe this is my cynical definition, but this is what I think it is. Somebody's going to accept me with all of my flaws, who I am, and yet they're somehow going to be exactly what I need and going to compliment me in every way. And like our relationship is going to be great. So I want you to have kind of exactly what I need, but I don't want to have to change. And in those types of relationships, we inadvertently have one eye always looking for a more compatible person.
Yeah.
But just this idea of that we're going to be perfectly compatible
Yeah.
and everything that's wrong with me is going to be made right.
Yeah,
and then that
yeah.
leads to the second one is the right person myth is if I meet or marry the right person, everything's going to be all right. And so what you do in that scenario is I'm looking at like all of the things that I want for them to be the perfect right person. We tend to focus a lot on like chemistry or what we feel. Reality is you can feel chemistry with hundreds of people. You don't even know their name. You didn't give them your last name at a spring break. Well, like chemistry is easy.
Yeah.
But this idea of like, I just the right person, everything's going to be all right. And I focus on getting this dream, whatever. And yet I haven't really worked on me.
Yeah.
And so I'm still bringing all of my stuff, my anger, my habits, my inconsistencies.
And I think this myth has been what's destroyed so many marriages and relationships in the social media age because, you were dating someone, in a relationship with someone, broke that off, married someone, things aren't going well, you're on social media, all of a sudden you see this previous boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever, and it's like, oh my gosh, they were the right person, and so now you've entered into this mess. I heard this said once before by someone, but it was like, there's not the one for you. You're married to the one.
Yeah.
Or it was something like that.
Yeah.
Did that make sense?
No, it did. Yeah.
Yeah. And so whoever you're married to is the one, And I think it's interesting too, you say this all the time, but wherever you go, there you are. So like you're in a relationship, it doesn't seem good. You see this person on social media, all of a sudden it was like, oh, that was the right person for me.
Slide into your DMs after 15 years.
But
you're like,
everywhere you go, there you are.
Yeah.
So.
Absolutely. You done?
I think so, yeah.
I didn't want to cut you off.
No.
But to that point, it's like marriage.
You continue.
Marriage reveals problems. Marriage doesn't create problems.
Yeah, exactly.
So all the stuff that's in you, it's gonna come out of you, and that's why. And again, it's not this picture of marriage can't be great, relationship can't be great. It can, but we're all just bringing stuff into it. And so one of the things I think is so important is that, like in marriage isn't broken. Relationships aren't broken. We are. And so we constantly have to be recognizing, I need to be healing in my brokenness that I'm bringing into a relationship. Because ultimately, I put this in my notes, physical things can't fill spiritual desires. And so the right person myth is kind of, I have all these desires for love, acceptance, security, worth, fulfillment, peace. All of those are great. God's placed those in you. No single person is going to fulfill any of those. My wife is amazing as she is, and we have a great relationship, despite how sarcastic we are or may come across in this taping right now. But we cannot fulfill each other. And when we move to that place where if she's the right person, she's going to make all of those deficiencies in me okay.
You got it.
It leads to the place where I actually crush her under the weight of that pressure. And so the question really is this, and I think this is a quote from Andy Stanley, who I referenced a minute ago. Are you the person that you're looking for? Like, are you pursuing being healthy and whole as you're coming into a relationship? One of the things, just real quick, talk about when we move to the next one is, I think the other thing is you have to really pay attention to some of that baggage that you're bringing into a relationship, whether
100%.
that's through counseling, whether it's generational stuff, whether it's sin stuff, whether it's abandonment stuff. Like, you have to identify some of that.
And I'll say this, sometimes you won't know you're bringing it into a relationship or a marriage until you're already into it. So, like, for us, our dating experience was really awesome.
was
Like
good,
we never
yeah.
fought. We got along constantly. That should have been a red flag for us, but we were in this kind of honeymoon stage of like, oh, this is great. And then we get engaged and married and the wheels fall off. And I realized, I'm coming in with mental illnesses that were never diagnosed, all this abandonment baggage. And so what I would say is if that was you, where you didn't realize your baggage until you got into the relationship, like, okay, no big deal. So now what you get to do is you get to go back and do the hard work of healing and getting healthy. And so, don't be discouraged if you didn't realize the baggage you had until you got into the relationship or you didn't realize how bad it was. Like, do the work now. Get healthy now.
That's so important because we didn't have the story of we got married and everything was great. And some of you do, and that's amazing, but others of you feel like, well, what's wrong with us? Well, maybe nothing. This may be the thing that God is really using in your life. And it took marriage to bring that stuff to the surface to go, rather than just focusing, I need another right person. No, focus on God wants to do something in you. So first lie, being married or in a relationship will make you whole. It won't make you whole. You've got to pursue your own health and your own healing.
So lie number 2 is that I can have stability without a firm foundation. And this kind of piggybacks on what we were talking about. But a lot of times when you enter into a relationship, things usually are pretty great. And when you enter into a marriage, things are stable, everything's going well. But sooner or later, a storm will come. And so if you are not built on a strong foundation, and the foundation that I'm referring to specifically to Jesus followers is Jesus himself, that storm will come and really unsettle your relationship or your marriage. Matthew 7:24 says this, anyone who listens to my teaching and follows it is wise, like a person who builds a house on a solid rock. But anyone who hears my teaching and doesn't obey it is foolish, like a person who builds a house on sand. When the rains and floods come and the winds beat against that house. And I think that's interesting. It's not just like winds, like casual winds. We're in Florida. I know a lot of people are listening to us from all around the country and the world, but hurricane winds, they're just not little like breezy winds. They beat against a house. It will collapse with and if you're reading along with us, you'll see those 2 words, mighty crash.
Strong language.
Yeah, exactly. And so a lot of times we want the benefits of a strong foundation without doing the work of what a strong foundation requires. And it really requires, specifically for Jesus followers, a relationship with Jesus Christ. It requires going to church, getting into community. You cannot have a strong, healthy marriage or relationship without strong, healthy community. You need those people in your life. And so I just think it's interesting, too, that Jesus in these verses doesn't say if the storm comes, but it says in verse 27, when the rains and floods come. And so for some of you, for us, it was literally within a month or 2 of us saying, I do. We said I do in May. By July,
storm.
By
Everything was
July,
crashing.
I was basically diagnosed with depression, anxiety, and then a couple months later, borderline personality disorder. Others of you, it may be longer than that. You may have several years of peace and quiet, and then all of a sudden this storm comes in. And so if you're not doing the hard work of making sure that Jesus Christ is your foundation, that you've got community, that you are settled in Scripture and know what Jesus has to say about relationships, when that storm comes, it's going to completely destroy, and you guys won't have anything to cling to. And I think of in 2019 when my brother committed suicide, and then we had the at-risk pregnancy. Weren't sure about how Case was going to do with his heart when he was born, and then your mom passed away a few days later. Like that was we had the storm of our first year of marriage, and then about 7 or 8 quiet years, and then that crazy storm. And I remember as so much of our certainty was being stripped away, we really clung to each other because we were both clinging to Jesus. And so instead of turning on each other in our stress and our frustration and our fear, we clung to each other because we were both clinging to Jesus. And that really made that year, in a weird way, very special and intimate for us.
Which I think can happen out of those really dark times.
Yeah.
But that's a lot of times what happens is 2 couples go separate directions. I mean, the thing for us is after that first year, then we spent a bunch of years laying that foundation. And we really did have it already even coming into marriage, but recognizing like where we did need community, where we needed help in counseling, where we were believing lies about our relationship, and where Jesus needed to be at the center. And the thing I would say is something's going to be at the center, whether it's your job, your career, your kids, your dreams. And so you got to choose, like, is it going to be Jesus? Are you going to prioritize relationship with him? Are you going to find other couples who can strengthen you? Or are you not? But that's really what it means to have that rock.
Well, because you're going to run somewhere when the storms come, right? You're going to look for some kind of shelter from somewhere. And so if your shelter is not Jesus himself, you're going to run to the shelter of your job, of finances, of another person, and that's going to be what ultimately destroys that relationship, that marriage. So if I had something to draw with, I would say, this point's kind of proven by a target. In the middle is your values and your beliefs, what you're clinging to. And then that influences your action and decisions, and then that influences your influence and your impact you're going to have.
Yeah.
And a marriage that is centered on Jesus Christ, that is living in strong, healthy community, that's going to have an impact not only on your marriage, but others' relationships and potentially your future children. So, anyways, it's not an issue of if the storms come, but when. What is your foundation?
And so the question really is like right now, wherever you're kind of at, what's the thing that you need to do to begin to build in that direction and build that foundation? Because a lot of times we know, there's things that are not being prioritized, and it doesn't feel urgent until it is.
Yeah.
So what do you need to do to not believe that lie that you can have stability without a firm foundation? Because we really do believe like Jesus is the center of that. If you're single and you're looking for somebody, I really think there has to be that compatibility in the right kind of way. So you just said it, you're running to the same thing when everything hits the fan.
Your shelter's the same. Yep.
Yeah. So the third lie is I can make progress without effort, which on the surface it's like, well, that's an easy one to identify. But I'm telling you, like, that's a baby monster below the surface, because a lot of times we do in the back of my mind have this idea that marriages can kind of be turnkey, like plug and play. It's going to work. And again, I think it goes back to our first point.
That's what I was going to say, yeah.
Compatibility.
You find the right person,
they're the right
it just
person.
works.
It's going to be easy. Nah, it doesn't.
Yeah.
They can be as right as possible. They may be the most right person for you on planet, but there's still going to be stuff where it's really difficult. Chemistry is not enough. Great sex is not enough. And by the way, great sex comes from great relationship. Like, you're going to have to put in the effort to do what it takes to maintain and sustain and build love and intimacy in that marriage. And so, like, at some level, you do have to work hard for that. Like, one of the statements that we hear a lot is, why would we just fell out of love? Well, if I can be as gracious as I can be, it's because you don't quite understand love. Because here's how Jesus defined love in John 13:34. He's in his upper room with his guys, and he's like, a new, or really what it meant, a hidden, not that they had never heard about love before, but the way Jesus is going to describe it, it's new, it's different. And he says, a new command I give you, love one another. And you're like, well, what's the big deal about that? The big deal is in this moment, Jesus took what generally was referred to, like just as a noun or used as a noun, like just love somebody, which is all about, I feel it, they're the right person, we're compatible, that stuff just works. And in this instance, he uses it as a verb. And so in essence, he's going, I want you to not go feel something or fall back into something, or it's not about falling out of something, it's I want you to go do something. And so the moment you go, well, we're just not in love anymore. No, you mean you're not feeling it anymore. Jesus is like, you fell out of noun, and I need you to go verb. I need you to start loving them. And if you start to move in the direction of loving them, even when it's hard, even when you're not feeling loving feelings, something begins to happen in that. Like, this is why, this is how I think about this in the one incident in the New Testament where Jesus says, I want you to love your enemies. Like, Jesus isn't a liar. The reason he could say that is not because you feel all of these loving feelings for your enemies. It's because love really is a decision and it's an action. And listen, I don't want to, make light of what you're walking through. There may be some really difficult stuff in a relationship. There may be some extreme behavior on the part of somebody else. I understand all that, and there's room and places for boundaries in relationships. But there's also a lot of relationships where it really comes down to who's going to go first and move in the direction of I'm going to love you, and because we're not, each feeling a lot of loving feelings right now, but I'm going to begin to verb you again. I'm going to begin to lay down my life for you, sacrifice for you, be emotionally available to you. And something begins to happen when you do that.
And if I can just jump in real quickly too, you and your partner, your spouse, whoever you're in relationship with, you're both going to change, right? That's what time does. You change.
Everybody marries a stranger at some level.
Exactly. And so I think, again, we're going to quote Andy and Sandra Stanley, because these guys, anything they do about marriage, relationship, kids, you need to listen to. But they talk about studying the person that you love. And so if you're going through a season right now where you're not feeling it and it's difficult, then maybe what you need to do is start to restudy the person that you're in relationship with. because maybe the things that you guys used to do to communicate love don't work the same way anymore. And so get to know each other again, figure out how they communicate and receive love, and really start to study that person. And
and the last thing I would just say on this point is they need to feel it. And so you can say it all you want, but they need to, and love isn't a feeling, but I'm talking about you expressing it to somebody else. They need to feel like they are the top priority, that I will do whatever it takes on my schedule, with my money, with working to be emotionally available to you, even if it's not second nature to me. So that, for us it's really practical stuff. Is we get into counseling together every once in a while, not because there's a crisis, but crisis prevention. We try to study one another. We try to grow in communication of knowing what one another needs, like where I need to be more empathetic, or I need to let her know I don't just feel it internally, I'm expressing it in terms of being emotionally available.
And those conversations need to happen when you're both calm, and they need to happen before you start to get into an argument, and just expressing like, hey, like when you do this or this, like this is how it makes me feel. Put the burden on you. This is how I'm feeling. You're not meaning to do it this way. This is just how I'm feeling. Or like, hey, I know you're trying to show love that way. That's not how I receive love. We read The 5 Love Languages, which sounds like a super corny book, but it was really good for our marriage and for our kids, figuring out how they give and receive love. But
100%. And so my encouragement is just this: like you may not need a new relationship. You may need a new you. And what I mean by that is somebody just needs to go first. And if you're not feeling a lot of those feelings, they can be recaptured. And so don't buy into the lie that I can make progress without effort. Love requires you to move in the direction of the other person even when you're not feeling it.
So lie number 4 is I can require more than I'm willing to give. And so I love kind of how all these lies build on each other. But when you are in relationship, one of the things that you need to try to figure out is, first of all, what examples of relationships are you basing your relationship off of? So for us, in the beginning of our relationship, I'll never forget some of the best advice we were ever given was we have to make the marriage or the relationship work for us. We had to do what's best for us. Because I came into the marriage with, well, my dad always does this, or my mom always does this, and you were the same. And we were trying to mimic our relationship off of those relationships, and it wasn't us. And so you've got to think, okay, what relationships are influencing my view of relationships? Have they been good relationships? Have they been bad relationships? Am I influencing our relationship off of culture? What are those influencers? Then what you've got to think through is, what do you think you need from your relationship? What are your wants and your needs? And have you communicated that to your partner? Because what can happen is if you've not communicated, and this is one thing we do when we're in marriage or relationship counseling, specifically before we marry someone, is we ask them to write down, what are your list of expectations? What are your wants and your needs? And we have them go over that with their partner.
And every time we do that, there's like, I didn't know that, or I didn't know you felt that way. So it really is getting those things on the table. A lot of times we don't express that. Those little baby monsters that can all of a sudden down the road go, well, why aren't you doing this for me? And it's like, I didn't know.
Well, and that's the thing. It becomes a debtor relationship where you are silently believing that the other person owes you all of these things, and you've not communicated it to them, so that when they're not fulfilling those expectations, you get angry and resentful. And then what happens is there's your expectation and the reality, and that gap in between, you're not filling it with trust, you're filling it with suspicion. And suspicion, distrust, all those things, we're going to cover that lie in just a second, so I won't go into that, but it's oftentimes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So you need to make sure that you are in communication with your spouse, your partner, saying, okay, these are my expectations, these are my wants, these are my needs, that you're communicating those, and then that you are seeking to do to the other person what you want them to do to you. You know, that you're seeking to meet those needs and to work through those needs.
And as simple as that is, it is so easy for marriages to move along. And again, it's subtle, it's below the surface, but all these uncommunicated things, you have this idea of, you're going to do this for me, but I'm not giving out at the same level. And you can't owe me and love me at the same time when you get to that place. And this is a difficult conversation too, because not all of the things that you want are even healthy or you're going to get. But you do have to like lovingly communicate as a couple. Like,
and they're not
what,
all wrong either. Like some of your
No.
expectations, your wants, I mean, those are
Right.
legit things. So you've got to have a calm, cool conversation in a neutral place, you know, where you both can communicate these things so that you remove that debt-debtor relationship and so that you can have an unconditional, loving relationship.
And that's the thing, real quick, that I think is so huge, just to point that out, is when your relationship does become about, well, I just expect you to do this.
Yeah.
I just, whatever the dynamic is. For us, we really built on the idea that Paul talked about in the New Testament of mutual submission. So that looked different for us than we had seen in a lot of other
Yeah.
people. I saw it modeled really good, you know, with my parents, but in some of the cultures we were in, there wasn't a lot of that.
Yes.
So we did have to, like, well, what does a marriage of mutual submission look like? But the whole thing is when it's just about expectation, well, you do this, I do this. Well, I expected you. This is,
Yeah.
you know, you always handle the finances. You always do this. When it gets to that place, what it does is expectation removes all of the margin for unconditional love. Because even when I'm trying to communicate love to you, well, I did that out of love.
Yeah.
I went home and I cleaned that up because I was trying to express to you that, like, I value you. But all they see it as is, well, you just met the expectations. That's what you should have done.
Yeah.
And so the downside of, like, this baby monster, this lie of creating expectations that you never let go of or never communicate is you are both trying to kind of regain what you lost in the relationship, but neither of you is feeling that unconditional
Yeah.
love because you've made no room for it. So
Well, and I think the last thing I want to say is that you need to be comfortable with whatever healthy looks like for your relationship. Okay, so like Bryant and I have a very sarcastic relationship. We say that's our love language. And our relationship looks different than, like what he said, a lot of other relationships in our circles or that we've grown up with. But for us, like, this is a really healthy, confident, loving relationship. And we have to own that. And so I want you to own your health in your relationship. Own, it doesn't need to fit what you've been taught or how you've grown up or the culture around. It needs to fit, are you both healthy? Are you both living in trust? Are you both
Yeah.
living in unconditional love? So own it when it's healthy.
And the very last thing on this, I think when there is a relationship where you've been able to let go of a lot of the expectations and just, and not that you don't have expectations because you always do, but
Yeah.
I'm gonna try to set those down and just love that other person, give to that other person. What you will hear is a lot of expressions of gratitude. Homes or relationships where that's not present, you almost never hear thank you. There's almost never gratitude because, again, you've just kind of moved into a contractual relationship where everybody does what they were supposed to do rather than feeling like, oh man, thank you for doing that. Like, thank you for, and we find that we end up doing that a lot, even something that you've done in our relationship for 10 years, but there still is a genuine expression of, hey, that you don't have to do this. Like, thank you for doing this in our relationship. So I think it's so important to kill that lie of, I'm going to require more than I'm willing to give. And then the fifth and final baby monster or lie in relationships is, I can trust them as long as they earn it. Like, this is a big one, and it's kind of insidious because I think, honestly, if I'd put it out there, you wouldn't recognize it as a lie. You'd be like, no, that's the way it is.
Yeah.
But the reality in great relationships, trust isn't earned, distrust is earned.
Yes.
Like, if you're in a relationship with somebody, you need to make sure on the front end, am I moving in a relationship with somebody who can be trusted? But if you're in a relationship with them, then trust should be the foundation of that. And so 1 Corinthians 13:7, you've heard this a million times at weddings, but this is so powerful when Paul writes that love always protects, it always trusts. And you're like, Paul, are you sure? Paul's like, no, I'm sure. It always hopes, that's so interesting.
Yeah.
And it always perseveres, meaning you have the potential in every interaction. Like, I don't know why Nicole was driving that way. Well, I bet she didn't mean to. I don't know why he came home that late. Well, I bet it's a good excuse and an emergency came up at the office. Like, in great relationships, you have the power to believe the best or assume the worst about somebody in any situation where you expected this, and then this is what they actually did. There's always a gap there. And in that gap, you have the choice of what you're going to do. And I'm just going to believe that they're out to get me. They don't care about the relationship. They're trying to sabotage. They're just a jerk. Or I'm going to, rather than assume the worst, believe the best, that no, they have my best interest at heart. I bet they didn't mean to. I know they love me. And then when I have trouble with that, I go to them and I talk to them about it. But here's what I want you to get, and there's so much more we could say about this, but you have the power over whether you are going to trust or not. And when you move to distrust, and for some of us, it's more difficult than others based on our background, but distrust is always a self-fulfilling prophecy. You get what you are looking for, and ultimately you create what you are suspicious of. But when you decide, I'm going to trust them, and I can say this in our relationship, we go to ridiculous lengths to trust one another.
Well, because you've said
And
it before, the fastest way to know whether or not you can trust someone is to trust them.
Yeah.
You know, and I had a lot of trust issues in the beginning of our relationship.
Mark Twain or something, but
yeah,
whatever.
Who knows? I had a lot of trust issues in the beginning of our relationship. And I remember just telling myself that a lot. Like, the fastest way for me to know whether or not I can trust him is to trust him. And honestly, it did help me to start to learn to trust you. Now I feel like we have such an incredible relationship.
And then, you know, over time, you just build on that. But here's the thing about trust is that trust communicates to somebody else acceptance. And where you have acceptance, you have intimacy. And for some of us in our relationships where there is a lack of intimacy, both just in terms of what we feel sexually, I mean, the whole deal, however, you know, the broad definition, it's because a lot of times there is not trust, and that trust is actually communicating unknowingly that I don't accept you, and it's making it very difficult for them to be vulnerable and open up to you. So the lie of I can trust them as long as they earn it. No, if you're in a relationship, you need to go to ridiculous lengths to trust, and it may turn the tide on intimacy in that relationship. And so I just want to end with this verse that I always felt like was so peculiar that Paul wrote, but it's in the context of basically what love in relationships looks like. And Paul ends the section in 1 Corinthians this way, in 1 Corinthians 13:11. When I was a child, I talked like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. But when I became a man or an adult, I put childish ways behind me. And the thing is, how does like every childhood fairy tale end? It's with happily ever after. They find the right person. They live happily ever after. Everything is great. It just works out. It's perfect. And for some of us, like, if we were to be honest, we're still kind of conducting relationships that way. And we're believing some of these lies and letting some of these baby monsters grow. And now we have unrealistic expectations. And in Paul's language, he would say, it's kind of childish. So I want you to grow up in relationships. I want you to identify these baby monsters, these lies, begin to replace it with the truth, and it has the potential to change the tide in your relationship.
So let's just go back over these lies and the truths that we use to replace the lies. So the first was, being married or in a relationship will make me whole. The truth is that I need to stop looking for physical relationships to fill spiritual needs. The second lie, I can't have stability without a firm foundation. The truth is, I'm going to take the first step to put Jesus at the center of our relationship. The third lie was, I can make progress without effort, but the truth is, I'm going to determine what love demands before making demands. Number 4, the lie, I can require more than I'm willing to give. No, the truth is, I'm going to choose to replace expectations with gratitude. And number 5 is, trust is not assumed. The truth is, I'm going to begin to believe the best when I'm tempted to assume the worst. And if we would just simply start replacing those lies with truths, I think a lot of our relationships would be revolutionized.
Yeah, and I just want to encourage you, like, it's a journey, not a destination. But God can do incredible things. And, you know, we've gone through a lot in our marriage, but we are healthy and whole and have a great marriage. And I think it's one of the things that we're so passionate about because we did walk through some really dark times early on. And so I just want to encourage you, you can sow and reap your way into something better. It is possible. And for some of you,
it's never too early. And it's never too late.
100%.
Some of you are listening to us after 30, 40 years of marriage, and it's never too late.
And the thing is, it may be discouraging because maybe where the other person is at. I just want to encourage you, go first and start now. Go first and start now. And then I want to give you 2 things as we end that you can do as far as an action step. And the first one is we actually have a marriage gathering, marriage class that's happening this summer for people. It's called Engage Marriage, and you can come in, and it's really, really practical stuff over just a 4-week period. So look for information about that over the next couple weeks, and that would be a great place for you to start. The other one is we did a whole series, it was 6 weeks long, that talked about a lot of the stuff in more depth called Relationship Goals, and that is available on the Centerpoint Church Florida app. centerpointfl.org, our website. You can access that on our websites. It's anywhere. It's all over the place.
BryantGolden.org, NicoleGolden.org.
So that'd be a great place to go and start as well. So go access that content and be willing to just take a step. And then last thing is, because we're not meeting this weekend, thank you for all of you who are a part of this movement, who are giving financially, who continue to give this weekend, even as we're not meeting physically. You're having a massive, massive impact. So thank you so much for what you're doing. And as we end, would you just close us in prayer and pray for those who are watching?
Jesus, first of all, we just want to thank you for an opportunity to celebrate and to be grateful for those who paid the ultimate sacrifice, God, for our freedom. And Lord, I pray for families this weekend that are celebrating with empty chairs and seats and who are missing loved ones, God. I just pray that you would just be near them, comfort them, encourage them. God, thank you again for their sacrifice and their willingness to allow their loved ones to really fight for our freedom. God, we pray just over all of those who are listening and tuning in this weekend, God, who maybe are feeling very alone in their relationship or feeling very discouraged, very fearful, anxiety-ridden over it. God, I pray that you would just give them the courage to go first and to start now. Lord, I pray a special blessing over the relationships that are in healthy places. God, I pray that they would continue to do the hard work of uprooting these lies and replacing them with truths. And God, for the single people who are watching, God, who have a desire to enter into relationship and that opportunity just hasn't presented itself, that they would trust God and that they would do the hard work of just getting themselves ready, of getting themselves healthy, and that they would just enjoy this time and live it to the fullest, God, and just pursue opportunities to dream and to go after things maybe they've always wanted to go after. So, God, we just thank you for this opportunity to be together. Give us a good, safe rest of our weekend. We love you so much. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I was at the end of myself, giving in to my doubt. The harder I try, the harder I fall. Caught up, trying to fix it. I forgot what it meant to listen. In my weakness, you were strong. In my weakness, you are strong. You're there when I'm lost. You know all my flaws. Still, you're always fighting for me. You speak when I can't. In every moment, still you're always fighting for me. Still you're always fighting for me. I was at the end of myself, giving in to my doubt. The harder I try, the harder I fall. Caught up, trying to fix it. I forgot what it meant to listen. In my weakness, you were strong. In my weakness, you were strong. You were strong. You're there when I'm lost. You know all my flaws. Still, you're always fighting for me. You speak when I can. In every moment, still you're always fighting for me. Still you're always fighting for me. You're all I need. You come through, always do. You're all I need.